from the studios of Farm Journal Broadcast.
Coming up on AgDay, the Dow sets fresh records as world leaders prepare to talk about the global economy and agribusiness defending the balance sheet.
Because if we were to come back here in January of 2019, we will look back and say, wow, we didn't expect that.
A hot shipment of produce reveals a surprise on the Packer TV, and teaching future chefs the ins and outs of raising a better steak.
AgDay, brought to you by the Chevy Silverado, the most dependable, longest-lasting full-size pickups on the road.
Good morning, I'm Clinton Griffiths. The whirlwind known as Wall Street saw another record day on Tuesday. The Dow Jones Industrial Average shattering a previous record that stood for only 7 trading days. The Dow blowing past 26,000 for the first time ever. It comes just a week after hitting 25,000. Analysts say it shows further evidence that the long-running bull market is alive and well. The Dow crossing 25K on January 4th, the third trading session of this year. Now the same index hit 24,000 on the last day of November. Tax reform, company earnings, good economic data, and investor enthusiasm are feeding that bull market. Now, President Trump will be able to take the Dow record run with him next week as he delivers the closing address at the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland. The WEF is the who's who in global economics, but it also draws celebrities with their political agendas. The Davos Conference is an economic gathering. More than 1,900 private sector leaders will be on hand, and they will focus on international security, the environment, and the global economy in general.
And I think participants are really looking forward to also hear the leader of the largest economy in the world, President Trump, share his vision for the global economy moving forward. But I think what all we have presented here today shows that we really care about the growth being more inclusive, about skills, about equal opportunities.
President Trump is one of 70 heads of state to be attending the gathering in the resort in the Swiss Alps. Also on hand at the forum, the negotiators for the North American Free Trade Agreement. Those negotiations are set to resume in Canada next week as well. Interest from all 3 countries will be watching closely to see if a thaw develops on what's been a relatively cold and icy stalemate thus far. I asked the former Nebraska Senator and former Secretary of Agriculture Mike Johanns about the NAFTA renegotiation while filling in as host on AgriTalk.
I think probably what's going on here is there's just a little bit of backing off going on and recalibrating. The key issue for the president is going to be how do I come up with something that kind of saves face and doesn't blow this whole thing up, because this has very, very serious consequences for agriculture.
Sure. Is there any way to quantify the importance of NAFTA and what it means actually at the farm gate?
You can quantify it, you can look at the statistics, but in the real world, this is so very, very important for just the average farmer, the average rancher out there who's just trying to make a living every day. And without NAFTA, and then if you get crossways with China, this thing gets serious very, very quickly for agriculture.
Now, keeping with trade, 2017 brought good news to America's beef sector when China and the U.S. reached an agreement on beef shipments to China. In June, the 2 countries finalized details to resume beef exports for the first time since 2003. The U.S. cattle sector welcomed the news because of the access to a potentially enormous market. But with only 7 months to ship, exports were limited. Analysts say there's plenty of upside potential, however.
It's a slow process, and you know, if you look at the month of November, the most recent month, China was actually the number 10 beef export market. That's one way to look at it. The reality is that was about 0.8% of our total exports for the month. You know, just ahead of the amount we sent to the Philippines. So for the first 11 months of the year, China was the 19th, number 19 market, just ahead of Kuwait.
Overall, Peel says the key going into 2018 for cattle markets is to build up demand, as beef production will likely hit a fresh record in the new year. All right, let's check on temperatures and conditions from across the country. For that, we have today's crop comments with Mike Hoffman. Good morning, Mike.
Good morning to you, Clinton. Some very cold temperatures here at midweek across farm country. Of course, it is calving season in many places, including at Jim Koenig's operation. He snapped this quick photo of newborn calves snuggling with their mothers outside of the barn this week. He says the wind chill at 4 a.m. in Grand Island, Nebraska was 25 below zero. Now, taking a look at the wind forecast, you're going to see a fair amount of wind up across the northern plains into the Great Lakes. A lot of that's going to be a westerly wind bringing in milder temperatures, but it's still going to keep wind chills down because of that until it really does warm up. Also some wind a little bit in the southeast, but especially into the Pacific Northwest, where another big storm system coming in out there, and you can see that as we head into the day tomorrow, and that'll include some of the higher elevations of Nevada and California as well, as you can see. We'll check out your forecast as we head through the next couple of days coming up, but first here are some hometown temps.
Your next piece of equipment is on MachineryPete.com. Search equipment from dealerships across the country to find what you're looking for. Only on MachineryPete.com.
The macroeconomy may be roaring, but the farm economy is yet to catch fire. When we come back, we'll talk about defending your balance sheet at the Agribusiness Desk. And later, a good steak starts with good beef. We'll see how these future chefs are getting out of the kitchen for a lesson in cattle. Business news. Ford is trying its hand at small pickup trucks once again. The company showing off its 2019 Ford Ranger in Detroit at the North American Auto Show. Ford stopped selling the smaller truck 8 years ago and pulled it from the market in the U.S. and Canada, but they kept selling them in Europe. Ford figured people would gravitate toward SUVs.
The last time that we had Ranger here in the U.S. market was in 2011, but it's a very different truck, very different proposition than what we had then. That segment was much more about compact, a little bit smaller. Since then, we actually introduced globally the mid-size version of the Ranger.
Eckert says the new Ranger will cater more to that customer that's looking for that type of vehicle that they can use for weekend adventures and not so much the daily work like on a farm or construction site. In agribusiness, it was a mixed bag to kick off the trading week. However, soybeans and hogs found green on the board. Let's see how things close from the floor of the CME in Chicago.
The wheat market traded both sides of unchanged, but has generally been under pressure since Friday's report from USDA. So following what had been a little bit of a bounce, we've really just reverted back into bear market territory. This has been a market that the funds have been short for a long time. It's been a comfortable short for them. They took a little bit of heat on that rally during June and July, but aside from that, they've been comfortably short, and they've been able to roll into a substantial carry just about every month, which really helps them to make money in this market. The live cattle market traded both sides of unchanged here on Tuesday following a long holiday weekend. The market has really consolidated during the last few sessions, kind of directionless to maybe a little bit lower here, but overall not the volatility that we've become accustomed to. Ranges have tightened up just a little bit here as of late. Feeder cattle market's been kind of interesting. We've seen a sharp reversion back lower in the cash feeder cattle market, and that is something that is probably seen as being favorable by the feedlots who had issues with expensive feeder cattle. Again, Joe Vakovic from CME Group here in Chicago.
Brian Bassing, Advanced Trading, our guest here at the Agribusiness Desk today. Brian, let's talk about the current financial situation we find ourselves in starting 2018. And by all accounts, it looks to be a rather less than exciting year, less than dynamic year, although we still have a lot of 2018 left to get through.
That's a great point, Clinton, because if we were to come back here in January of 2019, we will look back and say,
right,
wow, we didn't expect that.
Yeah, that's
so
true.
I think as a producer, as a grower, what you always want to do is be in a position where you're defending your balance sheet, but also looking for opportunities to be, if the market goes higher, you're participating.
Yeah.
So
explain defend your balance sheet.
Defend your balance sheet.
That's a good term, a good way to think about it.
It is. I think it's just a way of getting your arms around your bushels, i.e. having downside price protection, for example, on your bushels. Having downside price protection. If the market works lower, you have protection against that. One way you may consider doing that is purchase a put option. Another way to do that is to actually sell the bushels. You've locked in the floor, but buy a call option to be a market participant if we have a rally. But defend your balance sheet, i.e. do something that gets you control of those bushels. You're not just letting those bushels sit in the bin, whether on farm or in town, and do nothing, because the market is grinding lower as we speak, and those bushels are losing value. Your revenue, your balance sheet is weakening if you're doing nothing.
Yeah, and it does seem like we are in this kind of grinding period where every week, maybe it's not a big move, but it's just a little bit of softening there.
I can't underscore that enough, Clinton, that this grinding feel, particularly the corn, is characteristic of a high supply, moderate demand year. We have to go back a ways to see them, but they're very characteristic where the nearby futures go off board, the next futures market contract in line has a tendency to gravitate toward that level, and then that contract goes off, and so on and so forth. And we've seen that many times in the past.
Yeah. As you, with your crystal ball, as you look out into 2018, is there any one thing that you say, okay, this is, if we can get to this hurdle, then this gets us on to the next part of the year?
Well, anytime you talk about our winter time here in the U.S., we got to look at South America,
sure,
because a lot can change. South America has become a major competitor in the world market, but that means that the world is dependent on what those South American crops turn out to be. So the next 60 days, Clinton, there's really South America. Then we get into our weather season, of course, in the spring.
Yeah, well, it's always dynamic. It's always fun to watch. And we'll sit down here in 2019, me and you, and we'll talk about everything that happened that we didn't see coming. Thank you, Brian. We'll be back with more Ag Day in just a minute.
To talk with Brian one-on-one, call Advanced Trading at 800-664-2314 or head online to advanced-trading.com. Ag Day, brought to you by the Enlist Weed Control System. More weed control, less drift and volatility, maximum yield potential.
Welcome back to Ag Day. Meteorologist Mike Hoffman. As we're watching this winter storm, it's already made its way out to the East Coast. What's coming behind it?
Really cold air, but it only lasts for a couple of days, and then we start to see a warm up across most of the eastern parts of the country. And that's all being produced by a couple of domes of high pressure, as you can see. But once the cold air comes in, we're going to see a westerly flow across most of the northern tier of states. And that will eventually bring in some warmer temperatures as we head toward this weekend. But in the meantime, it is snowing all the way down into parts of the panhandle of Florida this morning, up and down the Appalachians, especially the eastern slopes of those Appalachians and into the foothills there. You can see snow all the way up into northern portions of New England as well. Let's put the maps into motion. You can see how as we head through the day, we are going to see the sun come back out in many parts of the area where it's snowing in the southeast. Snow will still be lingering in parts of North Carolina, South Carolina as we head through the evening hours, and also in Maine, still ongoing pretty heavy there. Next front stalls out, kind of comes into the northern Great Lakes, and then it stays north as the warmer air continues to come eastward. And that next storm system coming in Pacific Northwest. This is a pretty powerful storm system, so it's probably going to cause some issues in Northern California with some heavier rain and some of the heavier mountain snow, some of the higher elevations all the way up into the Pacific Northwest and the northern Rockies. You can see, especially by later today, that's going to be the case in some of the higher elevations of Oregon, Idaho, Montana, and Washington, and even the Sierra Nevadas of California, obviously. But east of the Rockies, you can see just a little bit of snow, eastern Great Lakes, and that's it. By later on today, most of the moisture is gone east of the Rockies. There's the precipitation estimate over the past 24 hours, adding in the next 36. You can see we don't add too much in the southeast, but all of that snow, and it doesn't melt down to a whole lot, but it's still going to be a decent snow for those folks. And you can see some heavier amounts in the northeast, but especially the northwest, western Washington, Oregon, in Northern California. Snowfall past 24 hours, adding in the next 36. We're going to add some decent amounts in the northeast, as you can see there. And in the southeast, even though they aren't huge amounts, they're going to be a fair amount for those folks. There's the temperatures this afternoon, 20s and 30s covering most of the Midwest, all the way down to the Gulf Coast. Low temperatures tonight going to be dropping into the single digits and teens in places all the way down into the Ohio and Tennessee rivers. And you can see also also, as we head into tomorrow, starts to warm up in the western plains. That's all because of the ridge that's trying to come in. Now we have little troughs trying to keep the trough in the east, but it doesn't work. Big ridge develops by the weekend. Next storm system coming along will produce some rain and snow, though. That's a look across the country. Now let's take a look at some local forecasts. We head to St. George, Utah. First of all, mixture of clouds and sunshine today. High up to 58 degrees. Ames, Iowa, lots of sunshine, still cold, high of 23, actually a little warmer than it has been. Salisbury, Maryland, light snow at times, high of 35.
We'll check in on the world of produce from our friends over at the Packer. That's coming up next. And later we're off to the Lone Star State where these culinary students are learning what it takes to raise a quality steak.
Your next piece of equipment is on MachineryPete.com. Search equipment from dealerships across the country to find what you're looking for. Only on MachineryPete.com.
In news from our reporting partners at the Packer, U.S. authorities have ended a year-long ban on Moroccan citrus imports. The USDA enacted that ban back in December of 2016 after live Mediterranean fruit fly larvae were found in a shipment of Moroccan citrus at a Philadelphia port of entry. Now, recently, APHIS traveled to packing houses, groves, and supply chain points in Morocco to add safeguards for tangerines, clementines, mandarins, and sweet orange fruit from the region before they're exported here to the U.S. And speaking of imports and inspections, Customs and Border Protection officers in Laredo recently discovering a hot load of jalapenos. What they call a secondary inspection uncovered more than a ton of marijuana. The nearly 2,400 pounds was divided into 1,500 packages valued at roughly $500,000. And in other news, the Humane Society of the United States says it's suing USDA for dropping the organics rule. The final rule was scheduled to be finalized last month. The organics rule covers standards for organic milk, meat, and eggs. The animal activist group says withdrawing this rule threatens to erode the integrity of the organic seal. Next, with fewer kids growing up on the farm or ranch, fewer and fewer understand where hamburger or ribeye even comes from. The Texas Farm Bureau is trying to change that, one class at a time. In the Country is next.
In the Country, sponsored by Kubota. Tractors, hay tools, utility vehicles, mowers, and more. Visit Kubota.com today.
Ranchers in far west Texas want local culinary students to know more than how to cook a good steak. They also brought them out to the ranch to learn what goes into producing quality beef. In this report provided by the Texas Farm Bureau, Ed Wolf takes us to class where students are immersing themselves in all things beef.
In Texas, beef is always on the menu, and the person cooking it is almost as important as the one raising it. Farmers and ranchers around Fort Stockton want to make sure those grilling our steaks in the future know how they're raised today.
We wanted to give the kids that are in town, that are looking at going into a culinary occupation, give them some real life experience on what it takes to get beef from the pasture to the plate.
About 70 students from Fort Stockton High School got a chance to see a working ranch up close. Sarah McKenzie opened her gates to the students in Miss Salazar's culinary classes. In a few hours, they learned the basics, the difference between a bull, a heifer, and a cow, how they're raised, how they're treated, and a glimpse at the hard work, sweat, and tears that goes into every calf.
And what we wanted to do is we wanted to show the kids how beef is actually produced and how it comes from a baby calf all the way to the end product. I think most of them had never been in an agricultural setting before, so hopefully this will give them just a little bit of taste and identity of how we get food to them.
Students learned how and why ranches like Sarah's use artificial insemination. They heard from ranchers on hot topics such as organic and conventional, GMO and non, grass-fed and grain-finished. Plus, they saw how ultrasound is used on cattle to check for ribeye size and marbling.
It's cool coming out here and seeing all the cattle and stuff. The ultrasound, I thought that was pretty interesting. Seeing how much more goes into it is what really astonishes me.
This is the second session of 3 the Pecos-Reeves County Farm Bureau is sponsoring, along with the Texas Beef Council and Texas A&M AgriLife Extension. The first taught students about the different cuts of beef. The last will take them to the meats lab at Sul Ross State University in Alpine to see the meat actually being cut.
I don't think they realize how much agriculture they are exposed to in everyday life. But I think with this program, they're learning and becoming more aware that agriculture affects them every day.
A few of these students live on local ranches, but the vast majority live in town. These West Texas ranchers, both young and old, hope this beef culinary immersion experience opens the students' eyes to the future of agriculture and their future in it.
It gives them experience, and it may give them a new career. It may give them a new future. This line of work will never stop.
With the Texas Farm Bureau, Ed Wolf, Fort Stockton.
There you have it. That's all the time we have this morning. We're sure glad you tuned in. Start your day with us. For Mike Hoffman and all of us here at AgDay, I'm Clinton Griffiths. Have a great day.
AgDay, brought to you by Ram Commercial, America's longest-lasting heavy-duty pickups.